Alright, so this video is going to be about competence and confidence. And the reason I want to talk about this is based on a comment that I received from a previous video that I did where we were asking the question, how do we get people to feel empowered in their lives, about their personal well-being, about their decision making. And I don't know exactly where this is going to go, but I just have a few ideas. And the first thing is that it's multi-generational because of the current state of affairs that we live in was not spontaneous. It was multi-generational. It created a culture where people feel entitled and they feel comfortable with delegating the use of force to a body of people. And we call this democracy, the mob rules sort of, where we vote for a monopoly of force basically to tell us how to live our lives, to make decisions for us. And it's unsustainable. I mean, on so many levels. I don't want to get into the details of that, but I want to try to make it more personal. See, that's one of the sort of mistakes that I find myself making, but that I also see in the discussions that I have with other people is we talk about the external society, we talk about the culture and this and that, but that is part of the problem. Is we sort of use these arguments to deflect the fact that we are voting for a body of people to use the initiation of force to get what they want, right? And I mean, there's just some fundamental arguments such as that need to come about. And this is why I wanted to talk about competence. And it's sort of something that I've had to personally investigate into. When I was, sort of discovering the quality of the state, because I grew up around the state. I grew up around the government, had to go to public schools, but my father was in the service, my brother joined the service, most of my immediate family was in the service, and you can just see the sort of quality of character that one develops. And it's not to say anything negative necessarily. It's just, it is what it is, right? Based on the accoutrement of your environment, you become, or you have the tendency to become of a similar state. And so when I was discovering, how money came into creation, what real wealth was, and sort of establishing what I call like maybe the three tiers, where the primary tier of wealth I would say is like land and your sort of real estate, because that's where food cultivation comes from, and that's where you live, your residence is. So these are sort of like part of the primary needs, and then the secondary aspect, I would say, have to do with I sort of interchanged the second and third, because they would deal with currency, they would deal with means of exchange and trade, but they would also deal with skill sets. And the way I see competence is the more apt you are at a given skill, be it in your personal relationships or a particular physical skill, the more competent you feel, the more confidence you have, because you've spent time and gotten to know that skill. I mean, this is across the board. Anything that you can think of that you develop as far as a skill is concerned, the more you become accustomed to it, the easier it is for you, and the more intuitive you become in that development, and being able to find, of course, your weaknesses, but develop your strengths as well. And clearly, the major paradigm has sort of established through public education that you're not being educated for the real world. You're not being educated in a sense of being able to competently and confidently engage your lifestyle. And it's very interesting at this particular time, because all of the cultural values that had withstood, where we were educating you and telling you, do this, go get a college education, invest in a 401k for retirement, work at a place for 20 years so you can get your retirement benefits, and then by 65 you'll have your retirement plan set in, and so on and so forth. These sort of cultural values are now under collapse, right? College debt has superseded credit card debt. Even when people are coming out of school, they're not getting hired, and the government is more and more infiltrating on our personal liberties, on our freedoms, and so many regulations prevent entrepreneurship businesses from flourishing, because they have to go through so many regulations, which of course is why only the rich people can afford the lawyers and the lobbying to get the bills passed that they need to further monopolize their use of force, and this whole corporatocracy thing going on. I mean, I know I said I didn't want to get too much into that, but this has everything to do with one's personal development, right? Because we're also in this information age where we can hide behind the internet and make all these comments that we then are not accountable for. Then we don't have to answer to when we delegate the use of force to a government. I mean, this diffusion of responsibility is more and more socially integrated. So while I was learning about all of this, I had to say, okay, I had to sort of go to ground zero and say, okay, what actually contributes to my life? What actually do I need? What skills will I need to develop to be able to at least survive, right? I mean, but of course, going towards flourishing. I didn't want to just be stuck in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I wanted to make sure that I've gotten a chance to flourish spiritually, and just which doesn't necessarily mean religion. It just means life. It just means questioning where we came from, and just self-discovery. That's what my brief explanation of a spiritual quest, if you want to call it that, is. And so the things that I started to look into are alternative energies, solar energy, in particular agriculture, permaculture, and aquaponics particularly, and personal relationships is major, because the dissolution of the community is, to me, one of the most contributory aspects of why we cannot solve our problems, right? The culture is sort of ingrained that you can do your own thing, and you don't have to, you can segregate yourself from the community, from people, and get along, internet businesses, all sorts of things. But that's the reason that is sort of diminishing, is the fact that it's going to be increasingly harder for people to get resources from abroad as government sanctions keep pouring in, right? As peak oil is harder to get oil, it's going to be more and more costly to get your food from clear across the world. And we're going to have to start thinking more and more locally. And this is just my perspective. I'm a 25 novice, amateur investor, so take my words with a grain of salt. And it's all about self-investigation to me. It's all about, okay, but how, not just buying into what someone else says, but okay, how does it fit in with my ability to reason and think through the problems and the solutions as well. So I hope you guys can understand where competence fits in, but of course where I see competence lacking in others is the fact that we are taught, and we teach each other, not to question things. We not only can we not raise questions without getting overly emotional about things like religion and politics, but we can't even talk about the basics of our personal exchanges, right? A lot of us sort of engage in relationships that aren't really, if we would truly ask questions, they're not real relationships, right? You don't question and raise questions about each other's character that would help, your relationship build. You sort of see things in others, and other people see things in you, and then you don't ask the questions. You say, okay, I'm just going to leave that alone, because then it's going to get all emotional and this and that. And this is everything about community. It's about relationships. And so, especially with Facebook, right? I mean, you have all these friends, but you probably don't really have them as friends. And then you have this structure called the state that has all these mandates, right? They're your source of food, they're your source of education, they're your forced taxation. They tell you, they're getting more and more in tune with telling you exactly how to live your life, because you vote for that, right? As long as we have a system where there's a bunch of people who specifically vote and contribute constantly to this purport of force, stealing wealth from a portion of people and then handing it down to another, of course these things will continue to happen. And then at the same time, if you don't have the relationships, your personal relationships, which is actually where I would say it starts, if you don't have the kind of relationships that encourage you to develop your character, that encourage you to be your best self and help you be a good person and vice versa, then you're likely to just fall in line with whatever the cultural norms are, whatever the pop culture says we do. And that's what we're seeing ultimately fail, is everybody that has been getting all these benefits for at least the last 30 years, arguably much longer than that, right? I would say at least the last 100, but we'll just stick to more recently, the last 30 years, saying, oh yeah, here's all this stuff, we're going to give you all these things, all you have to do is keep voting for us and this and that. Then it causes people not to raise questions, right? If you're getting a fat paycheck, you're getting all these benefits, you're just not going to ask the fundamental questions, because morality is not one of the prominent cultural dispositions. I would just say consumerism is. That's the whole fundamental reality of our economic system, and including our political and the whole government structure, is spend more money, accrue more debt, so that way we can enslave your children and children's children. And even the prison system, right? They don't have any more room for the prisons, and you can argue, of course, that most of the people locked up are for nonviolent crimes. I mean, it's all to perpetuate and build up this system to fund and funnel the money into the few people at the top, while at the same time we storm the world, instituting force. So how do we how do we empower people? How do we gain incompetence? And of course it goes into education. Let me just check the time on the video. Okay, I got a couple minutes, and this is going to be the sort of wrap up. Is education. It's a multi-generational process, because it's a multi-generational process that got us here. We have to rebuild communities, rebuild mentorship programs where we're actually engaging all age groups, because we need to out each other on the sort of, things that we're doing on a daily basis that contribute to the sort of quality of character that we see in dysfunctional families, dysfunctional communities. So it's a real painstaking process to me. I think it's something that's going to take a lot of courage, and it's something that I've had to develop in my own life, because I, like so many others, were inclined to not raise questions, not question people, not question authority, and that was constantly resulting in problems in my relationships. So I had to grow into doing more of the questioning, doing more of inquiring into myself and figuring out, what the hell is going on in the world, right? But these are just my thoughts, and I would love to hear what you guys think on the subject of competence and confidence, and any other topic that you might want to bring forward, related or not. But I hope you guys have a good day.